a life with God requires sacrifice. And that's just not a popular thing to say. It's not a popular thing to talk about. But I even think that a lot of Christians sometimes get the idea of sacrifice wrong. I mean, we see in Romans 12:1 that it says, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, that is true and proper worship. So the idea is, what is sacrifice? I think we see the true picture of what sacrifice is in John chapter 12, when we have Mary spilling the perfume and offering perfume as a sacrifice and as an offering to Jesus. So Jesus is sitting down with Lazarus, who, by the way, he just raised from the dead a little bit ago, and Martha, the sister. And so Mary comes in while they're eating, and she basically interrupts this social setting, which, by the way, at the time of this writing, was completely inappropriate in a social context. Like, a woman is not supposed to come in and interrupt them. And then she falls to Jesus's feet, and she actually pours out perfume at Jesus's feet. And we see this all at the very beginning of John chapter 12. And so what's interesting is, this is a classic story again, where we see Judas Iscariot, who eventually, betrays Jesus, and he gets mad, and he's like, hey, what's going on here, guys? Why would we not take that perfume and sell it and give it to the poor? Now, a couple of things on this is, number one, we have to understand that what Judas is obviously the villain, even though we can be Judas at times. He's looked at as the villain of this story. And we think that he's alone in this, but actually we understand from the other gospels that the other disciples were thinking the same thing. They're kind of like, wait a second, because the amount of perfume that Mary spilled at Jesus' feet was equal to a year's salary. So she just dumps this out and gives it to Jesus. So Judas saying, hey guys, why don't we just like sell this and give it to the poor? Number one, we have to understand there was hidden motives obviously there, because Judas would steal. He was a treasurer, so he would steal and take some for himself. So that's kind of why he was suggesting this, but it wasn't a bad suggestion in itself. And the other disciples were kind of like, yeah, why didn't we do that? So what we have to first realize is, we are Judas sometimes. And what I mean by that is, Judas suggested something that was a good thing to do, but was also going to benefit himself. And so many times I think as believers, we are willing to be obedient to God and to do things for the Lord and serve him, as long as it also serves ourselves. Like, we're okay serving in a ministry as long as we're elevated in our platform. We're okay going and being obedient to Christ, what Christ wants, as long as there's something in it for us. But what true sacrifice is what Mary did with Jesus. And she spills out all of this perfume, and it costs a bunch of money. And because of that, there was nothing in it for her. There was nothing in it for what she could get, what she could attain, what she could level up. No. It was just, hey, this is a year's salary that I'm giving up because I love you and I'm devoted to you and I worship you. And that is the proper worship. So in our lives, man, how can we spill out oil? How can we spill out the perfume? What is going to cost us? What hurts to give? Maybe God is calling you to do something that you're like, man, I want to do that, but there's something in me that doesn't want to do it. Do things for God that doesn't benefit yourself, because that's what true proper sacrifice is. Now, God is so good and he is so loving that he changes our hearts and he transforms us by the sanctifying work of the Holy Spirit. But we have to understand that something is required of us in doing that. So in order for us to properly see what God is doing in our lives, we have to be willing to make a total and complete sacrifice that doesn't benefit ourselves at all, but actually just benefits God. But in doing so, we're going to realize that that is the ultimate thing that brings us fulfillment, brings us joy, brings us peace, brings us all of these things that we're looking for. And we see that in John chapter 12. So in this idea of sacrifice, my challenge to you is, take an aspect of your life and ask yourself today, how can I sacrifice to God where there's no benefit in it for me? Because if we're not careful, that Judas spirit will make its way into every single one of our hearts, where we're like, yeah, okay, I'm going to serve God as long as it's a win-win. I'm going to serve God as long as it's good for God and it's good for me. But what happens when it's not a win for you? What happens when you don't get something as a result of it? And honestly, that's what I think this whole deconstruction movement is about right now with this younger generation, is they were fed and taught a grace gospel, and that's all they ever heard was God was loving and God is gracious and accept his love and he accepts you and all of this. And we were never taught the sanctifying work of the Holy Spirit, the righteousness and the holiness of God. So now when we come to a place where we disagree with God, all of a sudden we change God, we don't change ourselves. No, that's not the case. Part of the gospel message, actually a crucial part, is Jesus telling people, hey, if you're going to follow me, you got to take up your cross daily. So my challenge to you is let's think about areas in our lives where we say, I could sacrifice more for God here. I have been selfish, and let's slowly begin giving those things to God. It's not going to happen in a day. It's not going to happen in 24 hours. God is a loving and a gracious Father, but it's about the effort in our hearts to say, God, make me more like you. Make my heart burn for the things that your heart burns for. Make me care about things that you care for. And in doing so, we will see ourselves modeled more into the image of God. So that's what's in John 12. John 13 is tomorrow. If you've missed the other chapters of John, go back and read them all, or not read them all, but watch all the videos that we posted, and we'll see you next time. I hope that you're growing. I hope that you're developing your faith and growing in your consistency. Let me know in the comments what your favorite part about this specific video was, and we'll see you next time.